ACT Party leader David Seymour says Chris Hipkins deserves no credit for cleaning up his own party's mess. The Prime Minister has made cuts, saving $1 billion now, including some key climate change initiatives that have been ditched. Seymour said this of Chris Hipkins yesterday: he's like a kid who messes up his room and wants a reward for tidying it. Here is Chris Hipkins, the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, good morning. Do you want a reward?
Good morning. I'll have you know, Ryan, my room is very tidy.
Do you want a reward for tidying it, Prime Minister?
Well, look, you can draw your own conclusions on that. I'm a very tidy person, Ryan.
OK. Let's talk about your finances. Let's talk about the government's finances. You've said that this is going to save $1 billion. Is that every year or over what time period?
No, that's the cumulative effect of the program. So it's $1 billion worth of savings that get put back into the budget, and then through the budget process you'll see exactly where that's going.
So it's one-off. It's not $1 billion a year that you're saving. It's $1 billion total.
Yeah, over the budget period. So over that 4-year budget period.
Oh, OK. So this is not in 1 year. This is over 4 years. So you're actually talking about $250 million a year in savings. Yeah,
some of that. It doesn't quite work out that way because some of that's all loaded into 1 year. Some of it's spread out over the years, but the total of it is $1 billion over the budget period.
Okay, can we talk about how it is that you've managed to? Because you've said that this isn't going to have much of an impact on climate change, right? Minimal, I think, is the word you used. How is it you can find $1 billion and it doesn't actually cost us anything? How wasteful were you being?
Well, I think in the case of the two schemes yesterday that I've indicated we're not proceeding with, that were most connected with the climate, so the vehicle scrappage scheme and the social leasing scheme for cleaner vehicles, they were likely to reduce somewhere around about 7,000 tonnes of carbon emissions during the current budget period in terms of the carbon budgets. There are other things that we can do and that we are doing that are having a much greater impact on our emissions reductions for a smaller, often, price than that. So I think, the analysis has been done, and those schemes were going to be difficult to implement and weren't going to deliver the sorts of emissions reductions that we could achieve in other areas in a more efficient way.
Stephen Joyce says every brain fart idea has been funded by this government. Is that part of your problem? It didn't really matter whether it was going to do what it said it would do on the label. Let's fund it.
I don't agree with his characterisation, but what I did say right at the beginning when I became Prime Minister was that I thought we were trying to do too many different things too quickly. And so one of the things that I have been focused on as Prime Minister is actually narrowing our focus down to doing a smaller number of things and doing them well and doing them thoroughly. And yesterday's announcements continued with that.
Was it too many different things or too many dumb things? Too many things that just didn't make any sense, that wouldn't work. I mean, $500 million on this climate change initiative, you yourself have considered wouldn't have really affected the climate.
Oh, look, some of these things are worthy. Like if you look at the overall
what about worthwhile?
Of providing. Well, providing lower-income New Zealanders with the opportunity to move to, from a combustion engine to an electric vehicle is something that over time we want to be able to look at how we can better incentivise. This particular scheme wasn't going to deliver, once the analysis was done, it wasn't going to deliver the sorts of benefits that were envisaged when it was first proposed. From time to time, I think governments do need to run the ruler over everything and say, OK, are we achieving what we were setting out to achieve when we came up with this? And if the answer to that is no, then you look at whether you continue with it or not. OK,
it's taken you several weeks to come up with $1 billion. So given how much money the government does spend, I mean, why are we stopping at $1 billion? Is it just a nice round number? Why don't we keep going? Could we save $10 billion and not actually notice a difference?
Well, as I've indicated, we're not stopping. In the budget process, there'll be further reprioritisation, and there was reprioritisation before that. So the reduction in fuel tax and the increase in the extension of public transport discounts, those things were also funded by reprioritisation. So this is an ongoing process.
Okay, so how much more do you think you can cut? $1 billion so far. Are you talking billions more in government programs that you can axe without us actually feeling any effect?
Look, I'm not going to read the budget out live on TV. I know you'd love that. But you will see through the budget, when it is read in Parliament in a couple of months, you will see that we have continued to look for areas where we can reduce spending and where we can save money.
Is that not a huge indictment on Jacinda Ardern and Grant Robertson, your finance minister, that they were running around with the taxpayer's credit card funding pretty much anything that was put in front of them by an official, to the point where you now can say, I've managed to cut $1 billion and no one will notice, and there's potentially more billions to come?
No, actually, I completely disagree with that. In every budget that we have had as a government, we have identified savings and reprioritisations, and this year's budget will be the same. As Minister of Education, in the first few budgets that I oversaw as Minister of Education, I identified hundreds of millions of dollars in savings that we were then able to reinvest in other education initiatives. That's part of the budget process. I think that's what responsible governments do.
Is this a hint that this is how you will fund stuff? We won't need to have a flood tax?
Look, I'm not going to get into the. Like I said, I'm not going to get into the overall budget. What we have said is that we're looking to make savings. We are likely to need to significantly increase our expenditure in some areas, particularly around the cyclone rebuild, and we'll be really clear about how we're going to pay for that in the budget.
All right. So it sounds like maybe more through savings. How much have you wasted in sunk costs for the programs that you axed yesterday?
So it's in a couple of hundred. It's in the hundreds of thousands in terms of the money that was spent on those two initiatives that I indicated aren't continuing. You do have to spend some money in order to investigate whether they're feasible and whether they're going to deliver the sorts of returns that you want. So it's not in the millions, that investment was made, and the analysis showed that they weren't going to deliver the sorts of return.
Okay, so that's just
for those two programs.
Just for those two. So what about the container return scheme that you also ditched? How much money was sunk and wasted on that now that we've, pulled back?
Well, to be clear, the container return scheme is something that we do want to be able to progress in the future. I think, other countries have those sorts of schemes, but right now we know that it would add extra household cost. So we don't want to do it right now. But actually, the work is continuing on that. It's just not going to happen in the immediate future.
The work's continuing on that. So you're going to continue working on a scheme you don't know you will ever deliver on?
Well, when I say continuing, we haven't taken it off the table for the future. Clearly, we're not going to be delivering it in the next while.
Can we be really clear here? Because I just want to read you, this is from Eugenie Sage, who's obviously the Green MP. She said she's really disappointed with you. She says, I'm gutted for all the work that the Ministry for the Environment staff have done since 2019, when the government established a group to design and develop this scheme. You have, in the last 30 seconds, told me that those people will be continuing their work and now telling me that they won't. Can you be really clear for the public service, if they're working on one of these programs, is it over now or what?
Well, no, it's all very transparent. If you look at the statement that I put out yesterday, it said that we've deferred further work on that for now.
Right.
We will come back to that in the next term of government. And so some of those people in the meantime will work on other things.
Right. And how much time's been wasted? How many full-time jobs? How many groups created for this particular scheme that's now been deferred? Do you have an idea of how much money we're throwing down the toilet, investigating going down one avenue, like we did with the cycle bridge, only to turn around and go down another?
Well, as I've said, in this particular case, the work that's been done isn't lost, because at some future point we will come back to this.
Okay. Let's talk about the roads, the speed limits. You've said that you're not going to go ahead with instructing Waka Kotahi to be as aggressive in lowering speed limits. Do you know how many extra people will die on our roads because of your decision?
What we've said that we will do is we'll focus down the speed limit work on that 1% of roads where we are seeing the most injuries, the most fatalities. That's not to say that there's not other work that we're doing. So in other spaces, we're looking at improving road safety. So we're doing more work on the maintenance of roads, more work on things like barriers. We've got, significant increases in the investments we're making in that area. The speed limit work was only one of the areas where we were making change. We're narrowing that down onto the most most dangerous roads. You're asking me a hypothetical here because, sadly, we don't have a crystal ball to determine exactly where accidents are going to happen or where people are going to be injured. But by narrowing in on the most dangerous roads, that's where we can make the biggest difference to the level of injury we're seeing on the roads.
I understand it as a blunt question.
In terms of speed.
Yeah, I understand it's a blunt question, but the reason I ask is because you and your colleagues, particularly your Transport Minister, have consistently come on this program and they've told us that we need to slow down to save lives. We need to not be so worried about journey times and more worried about safety on the roads. And you have sort of gone against that. And you're telling me you've made that call without getting any advice on how many extra people might die because of it.
Well, no, I think, that the overall message is still that we need to slow down, and particularly those who are breaking the speed limit need to slow down, regardless of what the speed limit is. So there is a cultural change that we continue to need to push. We need to get people actually driving responsibly to the conditions. The speed limit can be 100 k's, but if it's raining and if visibility is poor, you probably shouldn't drive at that speed if you can't see what's ahead of you. So, the legal speed limit is only one part of the equation when it comes to speed. Actually, we've got to send a message to all New Zealanders that regardless of what the sign says, you should drive safely for the conditions on that road at that time.
Yeah, got that. Cool. Let's talk about light rail really quickly because we're running out of time. But what was the time frame for building light rail, and what's actually changed?
Well, what we've said we're going to do, and I acknowledge that people want to know what's happening here and they want to see progress. But we're also saying, look, this is going to happen in stages. It's not all going to happen in one big hit. The business case work that's underway at the moment will be focused to make sure that we set out in stages exactly what's going to happen by when, or at least to give an indication of what's going to happen by when. That's not a new approach for these sorts of big infrastructure projects. Okay. If you take the Waikato Expressway, work started on that in 1993 and has only just been finished. This is going to be a major investment over a long period of time in making sure that Auckland's got the sort of public transport infrastructure that a city the size of Auckland, it's an international city, it deserves to have that level of investment.
Yeah, so has the time frame actually changed of when this thing will be built by, finished by? Is that changing?
Well, the time frame, of course, hasn't been set yet because the business case work hasn't been completed.
So what's actually changed? What did you announce?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that we said. One is that, we're not going to try and do it all at once. We are going to spread the investment over a period of time. And also, we're going to link it to other investments we're making, such as the second harbour crossing, which I know is also a very important priority for Aucklanders. All
right, we have to leave it there. We have run out of time. Lots more to talk to you about next week, I'm sure. Thank you very much for it. That is the Prime Minister, Chris Hipkins, at 3 minutes after 8 o'clock. You're watching AM.